Okay, I'm going to call to order the school committee meeting of December 12th, 2022. And first order of business, the hearing of these videos. Do you have any hands raised, Melissa?
There are none on the screen.
Okay. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Jake Everline, our interim superintendent. I think many of you have met with Dr. Everline over the last week or two. But to introduce him to the public. Anybody who's watching this online. It doesn't look like it's a large crowd, but and thank you for being available for us, and thank you, Warren, and the HR subcommittee for all the work you've done to get to this point. Okay, I don't have any correspondence on school committee meeting minutes of November 9th.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the minutes from November 9th, 2022.
Second. Any comments, edits? Hearing none, call for a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll move on to superintendent's report.
That was quick.
We like to go right along.
Our report, 12 hours in. This is great. First of all, thanks for inviting me into your district. I had the opportunity to do a couple of transition days last week, and I just want to really reinforce you have an exceptional school district here. You have a tradition of excellence in your students, in your faculty, both inside and outside the classroom, and that really came through loud and clear when I got to walk through and visit with the faculty and just, obviously experience students in motion. I like to coin terms. I had this thing about coining terms. I came up with this thing years back called the Pittsfield Promise, and it stuck. So I'm going to call it the millionaire mindset. And I don't know if you like that or not. But it's this idea that we hold ourselves and others to high expectations and high standards. And I like that about the mindset that I'm hearing and I'm seeing, and that I observed as an outsider in thinking about Lenox as a public school system. At the same time, I think you have what I would describe as a really strong extended community, both inside and outside of Lenox. And that's the product of what I would argue is the fact that Lenox is a destination. It's a place where families choose to send their students. It's a place where faculty and administrators come to work. Having been the superintendent in Pittsfield and having had many fine teachers, obviously transition into Lenox, I can tell you it is a destination. So I have a lot to learn about you all, and my job in the time that you need me here is to help, and that's to help you all navigate the transition period, and a period that hopefully sets the stage for a permanent leader in this office. I don't have a particular agenda, and I'm glad to tackle projects as the school committee needs me to. And certainly won't be shy about leaning into challenges as they reveal themselves. I want you to know that I've worked with a lot of districts in Berkshire County, and I hope that one thing I really leave you with these sort of opening comments is how proud you should be of this educational system. The Lenox Public Schools is the centerpiece of this community. It really is coming through. Second, I want to thank everyone who's just been supportive of this transition. They're here on their own. The outgoing superintendent, Mark Goslin, was generous with his time and his interaction in making this transition. The central office team, Amy, Sue, Melissa, the admin team were in the room, Tim, Brenda, Randy, Dave, Brian, and everyone else I've had the pleasure to interact with over kind of a whirlwind tour last week. And again, I was able to tour the school, and it was really kind of comforting and a little surprising, I guess, to some degree, how many familiar faces there were. So it was really great to interact with folks that I've had the chance to work with over the 30 years I've been in public education in Berkshire County. Just a couple of basic goals. I didn't know if you'd ask me this on opening day. It was an interesting open day at 4 a.m. to wake up and say, holy moly, am I going to have the first snow day and the first day? But here we are, and we got this rule. So communication, just having a chance to talk with people, listen to people, hear what they're proud of, where they think there's challenges and opportunities, and really asking the question how it can help. So I'm hoping after the first year, maybe we can do some meet and greets. If that opportunity is something that folks feel will be productive with parents, with faculty, and with students, of course. Second is operations, just really paying attention to all the processes that happen in a complicated organization with a multi-school system. First and foremost, having safety plans, emergency plans in place, all your protocol, your audits, your connections and relationships with your emergency services, DPW. I was already on the phone several times, Jeff Carpenter from DPW last night. So really those kinds of things are just critical to making sure that the buses are running and everything is in motion. Thirdly is just, again, some context building for me, which is making sure that I have a chance to review documents, continue work that Mark and the admin team had started, meet all reporting guidelines, audits, personnel matters, help you develop your FY 24 budget, reflect their strategic plan, and certainly reflect the expectations of the Department of Education. And then lastly, it's planning and doing. I'm not necessarily a sit still guy, but I'm here as long as you want me. Again, not a massive agenda. But if there are particular things you want me to do, we got some early work and, supporting your work and choosing the next superintendent, filling the principal position at the middle high school, and then all the stuff that comes with sort of staffing and budget work this time of year. So I guess I'll close by just saying, don't hesitate to reach out. If you have thoughts, critiques, suggestions, I'm very open. My schedule is going to be 3 days a week. I haven't settled it yet. We have an admin meeting this week. We're going to talk about what works best for these folks in terms of the rhythm of their school. I'm not coming in here to disrupt anyone's, the way that things have been, moving along this year. So hopefully we can settle on 3 days that work for everyone in terms of meetings and such. So again, thanks again for having me all as your interim superintendent. So many recognitions. I have zero, I take, zero credit for, but I thought I would just call out, since I believe last meeting, you had some great athletic fall performances, I think highlighted by your cross-country boys team that won a state championship. So congrats to them, congrats to all the athletes and all the teams who were incredibly competitive in the fall season. I believe on Friday they had a signing for a student, Dennis Love, who's headed off to a D1 school to run Merritt College. I know a couple people there. I have 3 kids at Merritt right now. Okay. Congrats to Dennis on the signing. I think it's great to have those kinds of events just to promote excellence both inside and outside of the classroom, and appreciate the work at the high school making that happen. Again, these are not events that I got a chance to witness, but I just want to make sure students got the recognition they needed. Our drama students were involved in Shakespeare and performed Hamlet. And so I'm sure they did an exceptional job, and congrats to them in those performances. I saw on email thread that we have a team that's involved in as schools match wits. And my understanding is they're doing pretty well. They're seated first among 38 teams in the competition. And I don't know that I'm supposed to say anything because I think they tape it and then they air it. And so there's all this sort of secrecy around the scores, but did really well. And I just wanted to call them out, and hopefully when they're able to replay the show and air the show, we can celebrate them more intensely. We had students in the school system, which is still available in an art show at the Lenox Library as well as gallery. It runs through December 16th. So we've got a couple more days, and I'm going to make sure I swing by. The theme is No Mud, No Lotus, and students are have a variety of exhibitions that have been described to me, that hopefully, again, illustrate their exceptional talents in the area of arts. Always like to call out our winter athletes who are starting their training and starting their competitive season. It's an intense winter season, as we know, both on the court and on the slopes. And so I wish them all the best. Work hard, support each other, promote positive sportsmanship. As a former high school principal, those high school basketball games can get pretty intense. And so we want you to celebrate with your team and support your team in a positive and productive way.
I think there are 5 games this week.
Oh my goodness!
Wow. The schedule that David sent out.
Tremendous, great.
Start.
Yeah, and with that said, we're happy also to announce that we have a new athletic director, Maggie Rivers. As you all know, Dave Pugh is now in the assistant principal role, and we're happy to have Maggie in that role. She's already sending out emails promoting sports and when the team will be competing, so we'll hope to come out and support our student athletes. Some of the work I do on the Berk side does have an overlap, and we were able to secure a grant related to ed tech effectiveness. And the reason I'm telling you that is because one of the leads, we have 3 leads, and one of the leads is Kate Olander, who is a lead employee who works at Morris. And Kate has been a part of our ed tech Berkshire team for 2 years now, and she's exceptional. She's an exceptional educator who has extensive background in the application of technology as a tool in the classroom. And so we're really happy to have her as part of that grant. It's a $125,000 grant that'll go to support work in the schools around professional development for teachers, supporting audits of the tools that are being used in schools. So happy about that. I believe I don't think they announced this at the last meeting, but I got an email from Mark. He sent me along a letter from the Department of Ed that the high school won an innovative paths implementation grant of $75,000, which will be used. Innovation pathways are pathways that support helping students to sort of think through how they leverage their high school experience and explore possibilities post-graduation in the workforce and in post-secondary education. Continuing post-secondary education. So excited to have that. I believe the 2 pathways are health and business. Is that right? Or the 2 pathways are health and business administration. Is that correct?
Yes, there might be one. The health has a different name. Health careers, and there might be a hospitality component as well.
Great. That's the business.
Good. Just a couple other points I want to make. Between Thanksgiving and the winter break and the new year, there's a lot of community building that happens in the school. And I think it's really important that kids have an opportunity to interact with each other, interact with faculty in a really positive and productive way. Students are successful when they have positive adult role models and mentors and connections, and when they connect with each other. So I really appreciate both schools doing a lot of really interesting things that supplement and support the academic and curriculum, because one of your goals as a district is sort of the social and emotional development of our students, and those kinds of experiences help really build those positive social emotional bonds. As I mentioned today, and I was saying to Sid earlier when he walked in, I was a disappointment at not calling the first snow day. But we're heading into inclement weather season, and every year I've been a superintendent, I always put this out. As it gets cold, dress warmer. It always drives me crazy when I see high school kids coming in t-shirts and shorts, and it's 10 degrees. And also, we ask the general public to drive carefully. We have kids on buses, kids on sidewalks that might not be fully covered or cleared. And so we just ask everyone to use a little extra caution and slow down this time of year so we can get all our students to and from school in a positive way. And I really do want to put a shout out to the town's DPW crew, again, on the phone last night. They were out at 3 a.m. clearing our 2 school crews, Jeff Ano and Tom Hines, an exceptional job of getting the schools open this morning. And then Jeff Carpenter from the town, we really appreciate their work. So much happens to make the school system operate, and there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. And I always say that every single person, whether you're serving food or teaching classes or running a school, is critically important to the operation of the district. Finally, we continue. There's definitely been a little bit of spike in COVID in the region, so we just continue to follow protocols. I know that test kits were delivered over the Thanksgiving break to students, and we just again ask folks to monitor themselves and each other. And I know that the schools are dealing with some ups and downs on COVID absences, and so we work through that and support our faculty and our students as they navigate this health issue. And then finally, because it's the last meeting, I get to say, Happy New Year, Happy New Year. I always like to wish people best wishes, and as I say to my kids all the time, the best gift that anyone can give is a gift of time to yourself, to your family and friends, and to others. One of my favorite essayists is E.B. White, and he has a great quote that is in which he says, "I rise in the morning torn between the desire to improve the world and the desire to enjoy it." And that makes it really hard to plan the day. But
I like that.
yeah, it's a great quote. But the idea that we are working hard to improve the world is incredibly important. And sometimes it's just really sort of the subtle act that you make to others this time of year is a reminder that, just to be grateful and thankful and generous in our spirit in this particular time of year. And with that said, I'd love to introduce a student who's going to talk about, who's actually is embodying that generous spirit through some fundraising. And Brenda, can I put you on the spot to introduce Sid, or just a little bit about this, and then he's going to make a pitch to the school committee.
Sid Hansel. He's a 5th grade student at Morris, and he's going to tell us about a little bit of a project he's doing, right, Sid? Go ahead, honey.
Good evening, members of the school committee. I wanted to make a charity because I was inspired by watching like these videos of people give to people who are not that lucky. So the charities that we're giving it to are St. Jude, the Lenox Police Department, and the Lenox Fire Department. 100% of the profits are going to the charity. And the question was if I could sell the shirts at school. Any questions?
So the policy, as you all know, requires that solicitation and approval after coming from the school committee, and that's really protection both for our time and sort of the management of our schools. And so I know that Mark had talked with Bob about Sid coming forward and asking you all if this would be an acceptable use of his time and our time to have him. You're gonna sell t-shirts, is that correct?
Yeah, and sweatshirts and hats.
Great.
And you're gonna manufacture these, right? You're gonna.
Yeah, so we're gonna get a shirt printer and all that stuff.
So you're gonna actually print them yourself?
Yeah.
And where did you come up with the idea for the design? I'm looking at a shirt in front of me that feels like maybe it needs to be shown a little bit, but are they all different designs, or how are you deciding what your designs are?
Well, I wanted to put my birds because it would be more attention because the birds, So on other things we're gonna put my other birds and stuff like that.
So is this your own bird or just birds that you like? Ah, all right.
You can come up and take photos of my chicken.
Is what's the name of the bird on your shirt now?
Elfie.
Oh, so that's where the Elfie comes from. I was wondering. Okay.
Have you spoken to the Lenox Fire and Police?
I don't know. I think I can do that.
No, we have not.
Okay.
Yeah, so the idea, I'm not sure if I can chip in. Yeah, so the idea was, he came up with the idea of printing T-shirts with the pets, which we have. And St. Jude is the children's cancer charity, which we all know. And he was somehow inspired by it, so we chose that one. The Lenox Fire and Lenox Police Department was more the local donation, but I'm not sure the process for it. But as Sid was saying, that we wanted to equally divide the profits, and the printouts which we gave it to you kind of enlist those profits in terms of dollar amount, and there is equal distribution. So in the future, if we come across more charities, we would like to equally divide depending on how much profits we do. The one thing which I really wanted to add, I think Sid probably is experiencing, but being a dad and being a member of the community, I kind of experienced that it takes a village to raise kids. And I think at Lenox, we all do that finally. Not only the neighbors, the teachers. So just a small example, we go to Basque and he's just learning to ski and he fell down. And then this little girl who came up to him, helped him stand up. And she said, I'm your sister's friend. And Sid had no idea. So it's kind of more like a community. And I'm very glad that he's able to, and I didn't motivate him to come here. And I was kind of surprised that he has that to come and speak to you guys. So it means a lot, I think, from the school, from the people he speaks to. And I think it's all about giving back to the community.
So do you have a team helping you, or is this just you doing
It's me,
the fun that you like
me
to
and
do?
my friends are at school. We have like this kind of club type of thing. So it's my friends Sam, Sawyer, Julian, and a bunch of other kids.
And you must have the equipment did you print this shirt yourself?
Well, because we didn't want to get the shirt printer before we confirmed with you guys, so we just printed one online from a company.
But you'll be actually printing them yourself after.
Yeah, after we got the printer.
And what will be the mechanism at school for taking orders, or how will?
Like, I think my dad was making an order for me.
Yeah, so there will be an order form, but I still not clear how we would be able to do it at the school in the best possible way without interfering with the regular activity. I mean, we don't expect to sell a lot, maybe 10, 15 shirts probably to start with. And surprisingly, when we got about 10 shirts made of the same design, the neighbors actually came to us and said that we want to buy it, and how we can buy it. And a lot of his friends wanted to buy it, but we said we really don't know. We got to ask Miss Kelly first to really know if we can actually sell it. Yes, so we are kind of not clear about the process of how to be, and if you can guide us with that.
I'm not Miss Kelly, I'm Miss Fenton, and I don't want to give you homework, but if we approve this, one of the things I would like to see, maybe at the end of the year, or maybe after the summer, is to hear back from you, sort of how I started, what worked, what didn't work. I feel like reflective, when you hear that term, we used to talk about reflective practice, but for all of us, when we try something, and it doesn't always work the way we think, we usually have a learning chance, like, oh, I thought that would work, but then it didn't. Or it did. And I think I'd love to hear from you at a later time about what you learned, kind of what the takeaway is, and of course, how much you were able to, with your friends, support the community and make donations. We haven't voted yet, so I guess we have to do that. But I wanted to say that I think that's a really great thing. Everybody can keep a notebook or put it in your notes on your computer, on your phone. It's nice to kind of put that down as you move forward, and you may look back in future years and think about what you're working on now.
Any questions for Sid?
How long do you think you want to do this for?
I think just for the 5th grade year.
Just for
So we need a motion to approve Sid's fundraising proposal. If people are of opinion that this should go forward.
I'll move to approve the proposal by Sid Bansal. Bansal, okay. To be able to sell shirts for charitable purposes at the Morse School community.
I'll second.
Any additional comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Go for it, Sid.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job, Sid.
All right.
It's down.
The next item is, on an annual basis, you get brought forward the school improvement plan for review and approval. Tonight with us, we have our two principals. You received a copy of the plan ahead of the meeting as part of backup, and I've asked Tim and Brenda who were here today. Thanks for being here to do brief summaries of the plans. Just a couple of things. One is, I was happy to read the plans. I received them on Friday. These were plans that obviously the admin team worked together with Mark on. I appreciate that. Secondly, is my approach to improvement plans is that they're not fixated in time. They're not 1 year plans that then get shelved and then you cycle into a brand new plan the following year. I like plans that sort of build off of what's happened the year prior or the years prior and spiral through the existing year and then continue forward. So, based on what I saw in the plans and reviewing them, they seem to reflect that. So, really appreciate that we have two very strong leaders right now in our two schools. I'm very appreciative Tim stepping in as you have this year. You've done an exceptional job with Dave at your side and your faculty staff. So with that said, it'd be great that maybe Tim will lead off and review your beyond.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So I just, I'll spend some time. The way our plan is organized is there's a little bit of information in the front that talks about where the school's at right now at this point in history. So it's sort of a snapshot of some numbers, some data, enrollment, MCAS performance, changes in enrollment. We didn't include the accountability status this year because there currently are no accountability ratings from the state. They've been suspended since COVID. So I presented a little bit of that information to get started. And then I have a section where I talk about some of the challenges and strengths that are sort of shaping the goals or shaping the choice of the goals for this year. And the challenges I talk about, the first one is leadership change. Probably not coming as a surprise to anyone on this committee. I talk about some of the changes that have taken place over the recent history, both the district and the school level. And then I won't spend time getting into it too much, but the resignation at the beginning of the school year of the middle and high school principal was a shock. And in the wake of COVID, it hit the staff really hard, and they're still in a place of sort of recovering from the beginning of the school year and then the sudden reset that took place afterwards. I talked about staffing changes and impacts of teacher shortages. There's a fair number of staffing changes, I believe, from last year into this year. One difference in entering this year is that a few positions weren't filled until the very start of the school year, just days before school started. And I know typically from my past experience, Lenox is a fairly desirable place for teachers to look for a job. And I know that in past years, when postings went up, it was quite frequent that we had numerous applications for positions in the district. That's not really happening anymore, especially in areas like mathematics, special education, world languages. There is a regional and national teacher shortage that's already underway, and our district, our area is now feeling the effect of that also. And so that was something else that kind of shaped the start of the school year and the formation of our goals. Changes in staffing, and then sort of a noticeable difference in how easy it is to staff the schools. Post-COVID learning gaps. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this either, but it's fair to say that all of our teachers noticed that in the wake of COVID, a lot of essential skills that kids that you would count on kids having when they move from one grade to another. We now have a much higher number of students who don't have those skills. So what's needed throughout the course of the instructional year is sort of a backfilling of those skills and a reorganization of what's taught. And again, that's another sort of stressor, but another cause for teachers to kind of retool and look at what they're doing and adjust. And then I talk also about post-COVID developmental, social, and emotional challenges rather. And this is more of an observational item that I'm seeing, but also it's written about in the educational press fairly frequently that the time at home that students had away from school, and then the disrupted learning that students had when they did come back to school. A lot of screen time for younger kids and young adolescents. It had an impact on students' social skills, social emotional readiness, especially for students who might have been compromised in those regards prior to COVID. Them coming back, it's been a hard adjustment for them to get back into the swing of things. And so that's been another challenge that the staff, that the faculty has had to rise and meet. And I talk a little bit about strengths of our faculty and staff also. We at Lenox have a highly skilled, dedicated, and optimistic faculty and staff. A lot of positive people at LMMHS. And I saw at the beginning of this year, 2022, 2023, a lot of intergrade and intersubject collaboration. So this is teachers who might not have the occasion to work together are now meeting together and working together on topics such as social emotional learning, where that might not have been the case in the past. Another asset that the school has is that prior to COVID, during COVID, and after COVID, the school's known to have effective educational practices. And there's quite a number of citations and recognitions that LMMHS, that the Lenox schools have earned over the years. And this is proof that we're starting from a place of strength in terms of our academic program. And then another strength that I mentioned is wide-ranging community support. I see that, and I know from my prior experience here that Lenox is a community that supports its schools. And it provides a high level of support, not just financial, but also in terms of parent participation on committees, parent participation in the school, in the PTO, parent volunteerism, and just most recently this year, the level of support that a group of parents or our newly formed PTO has been making efforts to recognize our faculty and staff during a challenging year. And it's made a great difference, but that's another asset that I point to that we can leverage as we move forward throughout the school year. So following those sort of challenges and strengths that we have with the school council, with the input of the school council, I drafted 4 goals. And I'll talk about the first one a little bit. The first one might read a little unambitious. The first one, ensure conditions for student and educator success. It's another way that I'm describing it is try to make the school year feel as normal operationally as possible. So I talk about all of the staffing that we need to have in place, making sure that all of our staff and our students have the support of highly effective educators. I talk about reinstating staff supervision and evaluation so that all of our faculty and staff had feedback this year. I don't know why exactly, but it's been a number of years at LMNHS, as many as 3 or 4 for some of our faculty, since they have had a formal evaluation process, since they've been observed in the work and received written feedback. And so we're endeavoring to get back to that this year and get into classrooms and have conversations about teaching and learning with our faculty and staff. Increased communication to students and families. Again, this is just something that we think is needed this year. The institution of a weekly newsletter, the presence in the hallways, the community forums, all opportunities for the school leadership and for teachers to try and keep the families connected and informed about what's happening in the school. Again, in a typical year, you'd just expect that this would happen, but it's going to continue to be a year of transition. So we want to make sure that we're citing these as really basic targets that we want to hit as we move through the school year. And then the last one talks about leadership transition. And this is just, again, in understanding that from the beginning of the year to having a substitute principal, to having a interim principal, to having a long-term principal, the leadership change that started at the end of last year is going to continue throughout this year. So what we're going to endeavor to do is to make that transition as smooth as possible by overlapping as much as possible, by consulting with one another, by pre-establishing teams and groups of teachers already working on projects, and by having a clear, simple set of goals also that any administrator or leader coming into the school next can simply pick up and run with without a whole lot of investment or training. So the second goal I want to talk about is safe school environment. The rationale for selecting this is response to the issues of last year and the bullying audit commissioned by the school committee and released in the summer of 2022. And I termed it this way, that the report itself revealed a concerning number of incidents and an inconsistent school response to bullying and harassment. And the impacts of these conditions, I should say, lingered well into the beginning of this school year. They're still lingering in multiple grades of the school. And that indeed some students still report feeling unsafe in the school on a regular basis. So this goal aims to address this urgent issue through a number of different steps, which I'll get into in a second. But also by adopting and expanding what I'm calling some countering strategies, which I'll also talk about in a second. So the first one that we'll be working on real soon is to clarify and disseminate school policies and procedures around bullying and harassment. So in our student handbook, there's several sections devoted to harassment, bullying, the code of conduct, but it is unclear what the consequences might be for students if they commit these offenses. And it's also unclear in some cases what students and parents should do if their kids have been recipients of unwanted attention, harassment, or bullying. So what we seek to do is just with this particular area, get out some very clear, concise information to parents and families and to students, putting students on notice so that they're aware of where the boundaries are for student conduct. And then also later in the year, and some training for staff on one of two or perhaps two of two models. One is called positive behavior intervention and supports, and the other one is called trauma sensitive schools. I've already done a little bit of reading and discussion in leadership team about the latter, trauma sensitive schools. But they are mainly approaches to working with students with all sorts of behaviors, but so that staff maintains the most positive approach as possible at all times, working towards the most positive outcome for students. Both of those have a similar theme there. So we'll be dedicating some time, selecting some activities, and hopefully implementing a schedule of themes right up through next year under the leadership of the interim and then the next principal. The next section is pretty big also, training engagement of students and staff, activities to promote acceptance, inclusion, and to combat hate. So there's a number of different things that we're incorporating into the school year this year. One is a series of trainings for staff beginning tomorrow, actually. We've got a person coming in to address us at our faculty meeting. The title of her training is LGBTQ 101, Creating Safe Classroom Spaces. It's just building awareness of some of the issues that LGBTQ students face in the high school setting, and what they might be feeling, what teachers might need to know about, and how we can work to make sure that they feel heard and seen and welcome in our school community. We're also forming a student leadership group focused on equity, acceptance, and inclusion. The name of this group is No Place for Hate, and there are two faculty members that are taking it on this year. It is sort of a precursor to the Anti-Defamation League's program, World of Difference, which has run at the school in the past. But after reviewing what it was going to take to get that program off the ground this year in its full form, we selected to do this as sort of an introductory activity and hopefully recruit students for participation next year in the World of Difference program, which brings mentors from the older grades of the school down into the middle school to talk about issues of equity and inclusion. And then celebrations of diversity, community, and friendship. And we'll try to do a minimum of 3 this year. And again, what we're trying to accomplish with this is sort of the countering strategy of creating a environment where students have an increased sense of community, belonging, mutual respect, and well-being, creating a norm of that at the school so that students who are engaging in behaviors of harassment or perhaps even bullying will know immediately from their peers that that behavior is unwelcome in the school. We're not there just yet. Right now, I think that the tide is starting to turn in terms of students kind of waking up to what kind of school they want to have. But I still think that we have not empowered bystanders enough just yet to be correcting their peers in such a way. That's part of this goal as well.
Tim, this, when you finish this one before we go to the next one, would you prefer I wait till the end or can I on it? And it's about number 2.
You go ahead, Ronnie. Why don't we, yeah, this one might have some questions.
And first,
Before you jump in, can I just, if Ben Sauls would like to leave, you're certainly free to go.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah.
you're well.
Well, I was with you, but I have 3 kids, 2 more kids at home to. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Good point. Maybe they just were, school to meeting. So first, I just want to say thank you for the amount in which you're acknowledging where we actually are right now. I think it is great, Dr. Everwine, to talk about all the great assets of the school, but I think talking about the great assets, but then you coming in and really talking about where we are, that we still have a lot of work to do, is just so important. We don't get better if we just want to talk about all the good things we do. I'm also believe in positive reinforcement and talking about the great assets that we have and that there are a lot of people that really care. You'll hear later today that we had an opportunity to hear directly from the kids. We've already shared with you a little bit of what we heard as part of our superintendent search. Some of the things that, and all of this sounds like really great steps, and I think the follow through and the connection and everything that is needed will make a huge difference to the students, and the engagement, the student engagement part that you have interwoven in here, I think is really essential. The one thing that I think is implied in here, but I didn't hear directly and would love to see us get a little bit more specific about, is the healing part. I do think that accountability is hugely important. You talked about bolstering and reinforcing the weaknesses in our accountability structures. And then you talked about empowering the students going forward. I will just express my bias up front, having just completed a program in restorative justice practice, but the opportunity for students to heal and have conversation, I think can't be understated. It's powerful and it's brave when they speak out, when they've been harmed and hurt. And they do, I think, want to be part of helping with the solution as well. But we sometimes, I think, just our tendency is to not want to sit in the uncomfortable and not want to sit in the painful. But we need to really support our students, I think, in seeing and acknowledging. And I know you see that. I just was wanting to comment that I want to just kind of emphasize we're going to, and I think you have interwoven some very concrete and very transparent concerns and steps in here, and I really appreciate that. And that we also, the healing part, I really want to see how we can support that part of this, because students have experienced some very painful things, and I'm sure, and I know you have some one-on-one communications that you don't, that inform a lot of your viewpoint on this, and students being offered the opportunity to do what works for them is paramount. But the healing is really important. And I want to just emphasize that. And thank you for both the planning and the acknowledgement of the places we still have to do hard.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think that's an excellent point, Ronnie. The restorative practices, they're a big piece of this, but again, kind of from where we're at now, they're down the road just a little bit, I think. So I know that Mr. Pugh and myself, when we work with students who don't treat other students well, it's often a goal of ours to engage the offenders, if you will, with the victims and just say what they need to say and talk about why they did that, and for the offenders to hear from the recipient how their actions made them feel. That's very powerful. And in a couple instances, we've been able to put kids together like that, and it's been really quite a positive outcome for both. So I think it's on the horizon, but again, where we're at right now is that I think that we want to make sure that students are ready to participate in that sort of practice before we put them together to do so. Otherwise,
and And I 100% agree on that,
Yeah.
actually, it's a huge mistake to do that part, but my experience is the first part of the restorative practice is much more of the engaging with the students, either in group or individually, to really hearing and being sure that they know that they're heard in their concerns
Yeah.
about the way they're treated and the pain. And then also, as you mentioned, the trauma sensitive training, which is really important too, is that some of the students, their own reaction, their fears, their anxiety, their somatic effects of what has happened impacts grades, behavior. So that I appreciate that. I saw that, but the trauma, that training enabled to see teachers to see, and our faculty and staff to see the way students acting out under a different lens, looking more globally at what's happened to them is so important. So my concept of talking about the healing is really starting from, really the listening and connection with the students, and then the later part, I 100% agree with you, that students are not prepared to engage in any restoration that would just cause more harm than good. So I was thinking more in the sort of the bigger picture of the students themselves needing opportunities. And I do know we have a really great, really wonderful and responsive school adjustment council team that is helping with this as well. And I know they're there, and I know that's part of it already, and they're informing a lot of the work you're doing. So I don't want to suggest that that's not embedded in this. I know that it is. I know that it is. I just wanted to emphasize and also appreciate the fact that we're not glossing over or acting like it's yesterday's news, that it's very much embedded in the work that you're setting out to do. And I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Sorry, just one other question. You've mentioned a couple of times, I think, upfront in terms of disseminating and clarifying policies, kind of the consequences side of it. And then also talking about sort of how you are engaging with the students who are the offenders. Can you say just a little bit more about what the school's approach is to the offenders, but what the consequences actually are and how that looks to the rest of the student body?
So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of an example. If we have a student who is a regular sort of offender, and we have verified, what they've said, and on multiple occasions, and we talked to the parents, and they've received redirection, and they still continue to engage in that behavior. We tend to ascend the consequences. So the first thing that happens when we get into that next realm is typically an in-school suspension of a half day to a day. And when we've been doing that, we've tried to make it an instructive sort of experience, so that the students are spending time with either myself or Mr. Pugh. They're spending time with some written content that they have to copy, kind of old school, some time with the school adjustment counselor or the guidance counselor, and they might read a social story. And then we might refer them to somebody else as well during the day. So it's not just that they're doing the work in a separate place. We're trying to make it about what they did, and show them why it's not okay. And in some instances, it's worked. It's been successful. We've had to do it once. In a few instances, we've had to do it multiple times. And then in probably one or two instances, we've had to go to the next level. And that would be a full day in-school suspension, or that would be a out-of-school suspension. The problem when we start talking about out-of-school exclusionary consequences, several problems really. One is that it might not be viewed as a consequence by the student or the parent. They might enjoy a day at home playing video games. Another is that we might be creating only a hardship for the parent who might not have the ability to influence the child's behavior at that time anyways. And then a third consequence is that we're we're removing them from learning for that period of time, basically, even though we say we're providing learning activities for the period of their suspension, it's not the same. And they may or may not do it. And then another thing that just changed in the law is that actually the allowable reasons that we can suspend students outside of school just got a lot narrower. So they basically have to commit a felony, or they have to be conducting themselves in such a way that they're in an unsafe, they're creating an unsafe circumstance at high school or whatever school that they're at. And then if they happen to be a special education student, there's another sort of set of regulations and procedures that we have to follow. So out of school suspension, I haven't found it that effective. And it's problematic. So we tend to do the in-school consequences as much as possible. And you said, what the other students might be seeing. They might know that the student is here in school, but they might not know where they are. Whereas if they're suspended out of school for 3 days and it's very public, at least the student has shared that with other people, they'll know they're getting a consequence. And so it does have that sort of effect of letting other students know that there are serious consequences. But it's kind of problematic as well.
No, I appreciate that. Is there, I'm struck by therefore how limited the menu seems to be. Are there other types of exclusions, thinking about removal from sports teams or other extracurriculars? It seems to me that there are other forms of consequence that I think would be more effective to the student and send a stronger signal.
Yeah, so we just adopted actually and distributed to all athletes for the winter season a new athletics code of conduct. And it basically expects the highest standard of conduct from the athletes. And if they are not showing that conduct in school, they can be penalized by losing playing time or practice time as part of their athletic participation. And if it goes too far, they could also lose their eligibility for athletic participation. So we have tied the two together in that way. But again, it's I think the disciplinary consequences and the other sort of countering strategies that I talked about, those together, I think is what's needed right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The last comment I'll just make about this is I think, when we think about school culture and having a positive culture, all the positive is wonderful, but part of, I think, a strong culture is also one that recognizes and publicizes what's not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And so whereas it might sort of feel negative, very quick and public consequences for behavior that is not acceptable seems to me actually a very important part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Of how you do establish a positive culture. So that's why I raised it.
I don't want to speak too out of turn, but I'll just kind of dabble in it a little bit. But we'll talk later about Ronnie and I had a really great opportunity along with Oren last Thursday right before the town meeting.
Yeah.
To spend some time with some students from the middle of high school. And we had about 30 plus kids come into the library and just kind of have a candid conversation. Those kids were incredibly well-spoken and thoughtful and brave in their words. And one of the themes that I kept hearing was, what's a suspension or what's a detention? To a lot of kids who are, like you said, kind of these repeat offenders, it's just another okay, I'll stay home from school, or I get to go do my work and not have anyone bother me. And so these were, kids that were really speaking candidly. And I can see how that kind of can create a very toxic environment, right? So something happens, you hear the person's being disciplined, but is there any benefit from that discipline? And I guess that kind of goes with what everyone else is saying, but the kids were very, very vocal about that.
And the answer to that is sometimes there is benefit and sometimes there's not. Depends on the student, their situation, support at home. I know that we've had some issues come up this year at the beginning of the year with students treating other students in a certain way. And one phone call, done. Never happened again. And others who we can't really find what the path is. So it's really a tricky issue that we have to stay on top of. Goal number 3, I talked about the middle school program. This is a 2-year goal. So the rationale for this is that social, developmental, and learning needs of middle school age students are different than those of high school age students. And I mentioned some different approaches that middle schools take to educating younger students, flexible learning times, activity breaks, project-based learning, hands-on learning, social support, guided independence, all strategies known to be effective with middle school learners. I think it's fair to say that these strategies we do not use as much as we'd like to at the middle school level. And one of the reasons for that is that the middle school and the high school share staff and share spaces and share a schedule. And so that the time period, for example, that a middle school student will have a class is the same time period as a high school student will have a class. And they follow the same schedule that the high school students follow. And so what this goal seeks to do is to just pull this apart a little bit and find out if there's some things that might be indicated for our young adolescent students, some changes in either schedule, program delivery, the way that we either combine classes or don't combine classes and instruction, project-based learning. At one time in Lenox, maybe 2018-19, somewhere in there, the middle school had a very robust response to intervention model where students were benchmarked and systematically given support in the areas math, reading, writing, whatever it might be, in a time designated in the middle school schedule to provide that. But as scheduling got difficult between the high school and the middle school with the sharing of spaces and staff, again, the model sort of fell away. And they've had different sort of variations on that theme, but never gotten back to that sort of finding out what kids might be needing in terms of reinforcement with basic skills and then providing that instruction. It's only happening on sort of a, I'd say an extra basis right now when possible, as a focused effort. So that's just one example of when I talk about studying the middle school, things that we'll want to look at. And so I just lay out kind of what the steps of this could be. A committee by January, spend the spring basically looking at different models used at combined middle and high schools to see what they do in terms of pedagogy, scheduling, different activities or different things that middle schoolers do that perhaps high schoolers do not. And then basically late spring 2023, see if we can narrow a handful of things that we want to make happen soon. and then test them out in the framework of our schedule. And then I go on to say implement, assess, and refine in the coming year. But coming into the next school year, the end of this school year, the creation of the schedule, I'd like to have some input from this committee for one change that we can affect to the middle school schedule or the middle school way of doing things that we can put in place for the next school year. One, for example, you might know that we have a rotating drop, not rotating anymore. We have a drop schedule at the middle and high school. So 4 days a week, one of the class periods will just drop out of the schedule, and that will be followed by the entire school. What complications of that have meant for the middle school this year is that where they used to have mathematics 5 days a week, now they can only have it 4. And so students are trying to get through the same scope and sequence, the same amount of mathematics with a lot fewer days of instruction to do so. It's not working. So we want to see if we can do something about that too. That's what that goal's about.
Do we have a lot of 8th graders who are taking a 9th grade class, or 9th graders who are making use of an 8th grade class, or is there a fairly sealed line in the enrollment?
Within the middle school students pretty much take middle school classes. Occasionally there's an exception, usually in mathematics, a student might pop up into a higher mathematics class. Rarely, it might happen in world language, that a student is a native speaker of another language and might be popping up into a high school section. But no, it's pretty rare. They usually stay within their grade cohort.
So for scheduling coordination, there's no reason middle school needs to be. I mean, besides the fact that it's easy to do one schedule for everybody, you could in fact have a very different looking schedule.
And it's complicated, right? Because if you touch one thing in the schedule over here, it's going to kind of have an impact over here, because it means that we can't offer this during this time. So the kids that need to be here during this time because they have band or AP French or something else that's a singleton class only offered in one place in the schedule, they have to retool their schedule. And so it's really interconnected and dynamic. And
Well, so sorry, maybe I wasn't asking all. Do we have 6th through 8th graders who are contacting those 9th through 12th grade classes, or would changing what the 6th through 8th schedule looks like not really affect?
I think what it does, like it frees up somebody or something, right? Like it's
So I guess another question, there's a lot of teachers work on that.
right. It's another resource, but then it creates like, somebody has to be, it's kind of like specialists in elementary school, right? Specialists take over, teacher gets it, like that kind of, sort of mixing around. So the same kind of thing, I believe, probably happens in that schedule format, right? So it's going somewhere, it's eliminating something else.
Well, the physical space, I don't think, well, maybe this is better way to ask the question. What are the resources that do cross over significantly from middle school to high school? Specialists? Is there a lot of crossover in physical space?
world language teachers, they share a lunch hour. They share 2 lunch hours, actually. And a couple spaces are kind of rotated through by middle school or high school sections during the day. And it's pretty complicated.
And there's some teachers who don't have a classroom.
Correct. So somebody might be on prep and they might go to an office-like setting, and somebody comes in for a section of French or and then my last goal, well, that was the last goal. Oh yeah, the last goal 4, improve written communication abilities of high school students. And this is a 2-year goal. And this is somewhat a reaction, I think, to COVID and what high school teachers at least are noticing as one of the perhaps more significant impacts of COVID learning loss is writing skills. And I think that teachers in the upper grades of high school used to be able to expect that students would be able to write a cogent, well-formed paragraph and then extend it into a 5-paragraph essay with a predictable style. And it's just not the case anymore. So the high school English staff primarily, with the help of special education and the English language learner teacher, are going to be laying out a number of specific steps to try and get the students back into sort of a more predictable pattern of improvement when it comes to their writing abilities. And this goal was written primarily by Dr. Weaver. Action items: assessment, define focus areas by grade, identify student learning goals across high school grades, and then integrate instruction practices. One step that they would like to get to as well is to be able to have students in grades 9 through 12 familiar with and certainly by grade 12, very familiar with a Lenox specific style manual, which will have sort of expectations for grammar usage, writing style, paragraphs, and right now it's kind of all over the place. And so this goal is about improving student writing, but also retyping the structure of writing from grades 9 through 12. Probably grade 8 will have some work to do as well as part of this. But those are our goals. And again, I've tried to make them somewhat general. Again, looking forward to, or looking ahead, I should say, to more leadership changes coming. For the next principal, for the next interim principal, to be able to simply work with the goals that we've selected and spread out the timeline as needed, but not have to recreate some new initiatives or priorities for the school, at least this year. The school council gave me some very good input on putting these goals together, and I'm also grateful to our friends, the school adjustment counselors, and also the English department. It's very helpful. Any questions?
I just have a question on the format of this, and whether, you know, as I go through and I come through to the fourth column, which is measurable outcomes. I'm wondering if, as the year progresses, will there, like right now, it seems like the end of year outcome is more perhaps along the lines of what the anticipated benefit or results of the measurable outcomes will be. It's kind of the hopeful goal of what we're proposing, and I'm wondering if the outcomes will change to report on the outcomes of the measurable outcomes. Does that makes any sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, so so a lot of the outcomes that we talk about are just sort of phrased in the narrative as desired places we'd like to be at the end of the year with after engaging in all this work. And quite honestly, I think the reason that they're stated that way and remain that way through most of the document is my own sort of lack of understanding about how we're actually going to measure these things. Is it going to be MCAS results or ACT or students completing a certain key writing element in 12th grade that everybody has to complete. I just don't know. So, yeah, I mean, I think it would be better to have things measurable, but you'll have to, we'll have to check back in on that.
Yeah, I'd like to, thank you for this really detailed and well articulated plan. I think you picked 4 goals that are critical moving forward. Appreciate the work that you and your many colleagues at the high school were doing to get to these outcomes.
Same here, Tim. Would you say these are in order of your priority?
Yeah, I would actually. Again, I think the first one is just kind of like make the trains run on time. It's really important for the school right now and the staff and kids and the families and everything, just to know that things are just kind of happening and predictable and smooth and feeling calm and normal. I think that's kind of the baseline we need to get to. We're getting there, but it was like the thing I really feel strongly about too is that there's a scheduling and planning timeline where we prepare the course of studies and then give students the paperwork to start choosing their courses for the next year. And then that comes back to guidance and we start putting together a schedule. And then by the end of the year, staff and faculty might have an idea of what their teaching assignment is going to be, so that when they go away for the summer, they can do additional work in preparing for their courses. And students can receive their schedules in a timely manner also, so that they know prior to a couple of days before school starts, what their courses are going to be, if there's any adjustments that have to be made. All of that, I think, will do a lot to just kind of turn back the anxiety a little bit, and some of the stress that people yeah, and I mean, they're all kind of standard operational things, but again, I think that especially given looking ahead to continued transitions in leadership, to plan it out and to prioritize that we really need to do these things well, I think, I don't know, it's an important piece to me.
Yeah. Okay.
So we need a motion to accept the LMNHS plan.
Move to accept LMNHS school improvement plan.
I'd second it.
Any further comments? Question? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you to all of you involved.
Again, can I ask you just one more question before we move on? And it's really if there's any projects from the transition from Dr. Goslin, Dr. Everling, that you might need completed, or I know like there's a power school conversion that was going on. Some of those, are there any roadblock projects that are in your way right now?
So Power School's still not done. We're getting a little bit closer. We've got the people identified at Power School, and we've been in touch with them. And I don't want to get into the whole thing, but there were several implementation issues when it was brought over that have just guidance has done some work around. So we're okay as far as, report cards and transcripts and letters going out to universities where students have applied. So all of that's good, but it's not done yet by any stretch. So that's still a project. Besides that, I don't think so. I think that's the only big one remaining.
Well, if you think you need outside help or something with, anything we can do to help get the roadblock out of the way, please bring it forward, because we'd like to hear it. It was a painful start to last year, maybe we can skip it this year.
There may be a request I'm making via Jake for some additional power school support to come out to the school and sit with us and just get it all right. Maybe soon.
I know we run lean, particularly in the tech department, so we need help. Please ask.
As well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Good evening. Good evening. I have a few prepared remarks regarding my plan. As you see, I have 4 goals. My goals are aligned with the Massachusetts Educator Evaluation Framework. The first goal, curriculum planning and assessment. More staff will increase knowledge of instructional strategies and practices that will promote student access to curriculum. Over the past 2 years, we have examined our small group instruction. Tiering assignments and assessments keep the focus on the activity the same, but provides different routes of access for students at varying degrees of difficulty. Tiering assignments ensures all students meet the standard. And last year, 3 staff members and I completed a course through Bridgewater State, Reading for Change. The course focused on 3 big ideas: why social justice learning should be a part of our students' experiences in our classrooms and schools, how to infuse social justice teaching and learning into our literacy instruction, literacy programs, and literacy curricula, and what the infusion of social justice with literacy instruction could look like. So our final project for our group was to design resources to initiate some important discussion about implementing an anti-bias curriculum and to help educators in our building to find simple ways to incorporate social justice learning into our lessons. And these 2 activities align with the district's strategic plan to establish best practices for a diverse and inclusive educational experience. We will be starting that in January. The last activity in this goal is to move our building forward in science. We are beginning to do this by implementing a new science program in grade 4 and 5 called Amplify Science. Amplify Science engages students in real-world problems and engages them in investigations so they can practice both science content and practice standards. Our students are taking the roles of scientists and engineers. Mr. Betters, who teaches science in 5th grade, reports that students love starting new chapters with a particular question and take steps to explain why something happens throughout a series of lessons. For example, the students are currently food scientists exploring what happens to molecules when solids and liquids are mixed together. The students were able to test out different substances mixed with water. The students are excited because they are taking control of their own learning with this program. Preview to the budget, you will see that I'm looking for funding for 2nd and 3rd grade to implement our new science program. Goal 2, similar to what's happening at LMMHS, Morris will be implementing positive behavior intervention and supports over at Morris. As Tim mentioned, positive behavioral supports is an evidence-based program and practices that have strategies to increase academics performance, improve safety, and decrease problem behavior, and establish a positive school culture. Schools that implement PBIS have the same qualities as a trauma-informed school. So Morris is going to be implementing the same types of things that LMMHS is doing. Our main goals this year is establish school-wide expectations for common areas within the building and an acknowledgement system. That's what goal 2 focuses on.
Goal 3 is our family community engagement goal. Morris will promote a positive school climate by collecting feedback about belonging, relationships, engagement, and safety. Last year, the instructional leadership team surveyed the staff regarding the school climate. The leadership team and I have taken steps to improve and adjust some of the practices within the building. For example, Unit C members aren't required to attend faculty meetings. So they felt like they weren't always being informed. So about every 6 weeks, those who want to come to a volunteer meeting with myself. So that really just brings us together. This year, my goal is to survey students. Student surveys can be a powerful tool to help school administration and educators gather valuable data. The school data allows for an in-depth analysis of the overall school climate, at the same time rendering a representative picture of student perceptions. This information will be communicated to parents regarding adjustments that will be made to the school environment. And my ultimate goal is to survey parents about their experience within the school. Under professional culture, Morris promotes the learning and growth of all students through ethical, culturally proficient skills and collaborative practices. Last year, Morris implemented an instructional leadership team. That team meets monthly to discuss school climate, social emotional needs, and other topics that pertain to the daily running of the school building. Another action step that was mentioned in the school survey last year was more collaboration with our Title I interventionists. So weekly, our grade level teachers meet, and once a month, our Title I staff meet with classroom teachers to review interventions, student data. This is on top of our data meetings that happen after each benchmarking cycle. I know it was quick. I'm not a lengthy talker like Tim. School improvement plan. Lastly, a few items in here, the Morris staff and I have been working on over the past 2 years. We saw great success with our small instruction. So we are really just making sure that differentiated instruction, we're getting the most bang for our buck. Before coming here tonight, I participated in an MCAS webinar about writing, and they showed the state data for ELA, and happy to report Lenox Elementary School went up in ELA, and the majority of the state, their percentage points were down. So we're doing some great things at Morris, and I'm lucky to have such an amazing staff who are willing to take the chance. If I say, can we do this differently, or let's try that, they take that chance. And we took some chances last year, and we saw a nice reflection in some of our student data. So that is my school improvement plan. Any questions?
I was just wondering, you talked about doing some student surveys.
Yes.
Has Desi still been doing the vocal survey on the MCAS?
They do the vocal survey. And I've looked
Is
at
that 4th and 5th or just 5th or?
it's 4th and 5th now, and I've looked at that data. However, I would like to survey students on those questions are more in line with social, emotional, and bullying. I want to ask questions like, do you feel that you're engaged in your instruction? Just different types of questions. 2nd through 5th grade. I'd like to know how our students feel when they're being instructed, and then hopefully creating something for the parents.
Yeah, I thought there might be some overlap with the information. Obviously, it's not all grade levels, so it's.
No, that's a small representation of the school.
I do just have maybe it's a question or a comment, but it's not one of the goals because I think you've implemented it, but it seems like it's sort of underpinning a lot of it is you're still working the second step.
Yes.
And that, if I'm correct, is also progressive in the sense that it's age appropriate, but as the students get to the older grades, they begin those leadership skills. And one, it's not a goal, but it's a thought, and maybe you're already talking about it, is the transition from 5th to 6th, when those students then come to the middle school. I know we've talked about whether progressive programming, but the software isn't so much as the work, right? Like it's how you're doing it. The curriculum isn't so much as is the work, but that transition between the kids as they come out of 5th and then engage in this whole new world of 6th grade, helping them to be able to carry over that leadership learning into their middle school. So it isn't really that it has to be a goal. It's more of my comment that it's something that I know, I was very impressed when the students came to us against last year and talked about what they learned, and would love to see that really flow through and provide the students with support for each other as they go into middle school, and however we can help with that.
Yes, I'm looking to connect with Dave at the beginning of 2023 to discuss the transition of our 5th grade, because it's been a little choppy since I've arrived. I mean, between the pandemic and staff changes, I'd really like to start that conversation in January, because it's the school year goes by very quickly.
Brenda, Tim had mentioned for the high school a sense among teachers that there were clear areas where students were still kind of suffering from COVID learning loss, and that there were gaps. Do you have a sense at the elementary school, if whether from benchmarking data or anecdotally from teachers, interventionists, how caught up or behind?
I would say that we have gaps in maybe certain grade levels, and I can't say whether it's the pandemic or maybe it could just be a cohort of students. But most recently, I would say we are having some challenges, thus the reason for the positive behavior and support goal is just ensuring that everybody knows the school expectations and that we're going to be following those school expectations and the acceptance of all students.
And so on, but on the academic side, you have all the intervention resources that you need. That's sort of.
Yes, we're very full. So like last year, my math and reading specialists were able to be in classrooms coaching teachers and working with new teachers and implementing our curriculum. This year, we have so many students that need an intervention that they're not able to do that on a regular basis as they were last year.
Because they're meeting with students.
Because they're meeting with students.
And you think that is that?
Well, our enrollment went up too,
Yes, more.
so it could be a combination of a couple things. But like our MCAS, 4th grade MCAS math data went up like 17 points. Like we did really well. We had a lot to celebrate, a lot of hard work. We are just seeing a lot. We're seeing a good return on our small group instruction. We also were able to purchase a math intervention program that we started using last year. Great things have turned out with the money with the ESSER funding. Like we were able between February and MCAS testing, have an after school program for students who needed it on their math facts. You know, we're just constantly looking at student need and trying to address it in the best way possible.
Do we need, to your point about enrollment going up, and interventionists therefore being at least fully utilized in a different way, do we need more staff? I mean, sometimes there's an assumption that on some people's part that you can just kind of add kids for free as long as you don't run over class size limits, but that's not actually true. If the school gets 10 or 15% bigger, you have all sorts of places where you would need more resources. Is that a main point right now?
So.
Might be too strong.
Right.
But as we think about achieving these goals in particular.
Request an additional staff person for the 2023 school year. I did request one. Because first and second grade had literacy helpers, and the person who was a literacy helper in one grade hasn't been able to do that because that person has been responding to other needs with some students who might have some certain challenges. So I have, yes, requested an additional staff member.
If I could jump in, if some of it's not also just like the numbers are always great, right? Like data is great when you look at like a pure and simple number, but it doesn't qualify like intensity or the types of needs, right? You see a number on a page and it says 12 kids, 20 kids, 25. But what does that mean then when you start to really dig at it? We've seen like a somewhat of a rise in some kids with, some really difficult disability areas of nonverbal students, kids with, some differing behavior issues and things like that that have either come to the district or have entered into pre-K or now entered K, that sort of really don't tell a story if you just look at a blank number, right? And we'll talk about a lot of that stuff when we get into budgetary stuff, but just as a primer.
Okay. Can I also ask too, I believe in a different conversation, I know there was a conversation about ELL, that we have quite a few more, and I think that's demographics that we're looking at countywide, students who are not primary English speakers, or some of whom are still accessing communication.
Yes.
For the school, so that also changes the
Yeah, if I
needs and intensity of the learning, correct?
Yeah, 3 students in grade 4 who are level 1 EL students, so they're just new to speaking English. So part of that is also making sure that you have the curriculum available that they're able to access. And one student came to us last year and she loved, I think it was like Diary of the Wimpy Kids or something like that, one of those books. And we went out and purchased a bunch in Spanish because even though she's learning English, she does also want to, read in her native language. And she came in and she did quite well on her MCAS scores too as well, because we're able to provide that small group intense instruction. We really, the special education, the Title I staff, the EL staff, the classroom teachers, they all work cohesively as a great team. And you see big gains when that happens.
Thank you. Sorry, last question for me, just to your first goal, when you talked about sort of incorporating social justice into literacy and reading. What does that look like in practice? How is social justice infused literacy for a first or second grader different?
So it's through a picture book. So like one activity would be, I was just looking at one of the activities. I'm just trying to find it so I can explain it. I think it was a picture book. And I'm just looking at it. You would read like Mr. Lincoln's Way, and it's a book about, if you see somebody of a different color and how you would respond. So just through conversation and talking with the students, or maybe having them do a reflection. That's in the younger grades.
Brenda, can I ask you about goal number 2?
Sure.
It looks like increased student social emotional behavior competence, a consistent framework for organizing positive behavior, and responding to rule violations and an orderly positive school climate. Those seem like things that are probably well underway anyway. What's the difference with the PBIF, or why do you feel like we need to try something different?
So it's more being consistent in the way that we approach student behavior and our language in presenting information to students. So, having new students in the building, this is what it looks like in the cafeteria if we're following the student expectations, and then acknowledging the students who are doing the right thing. It's having a common language just throughout the building.
We haven't been doing that in the past.
I would say it was consistent. We're gonna have a consistent. So like, I guess a way to, is LMMHS has the pillars of success. We're going to do something at a smaller level. Similar.
Thank you.
Motion? Oh,
So I was just gonna, I didn't want, Mr. Lee to feel singled out, but my question also pertains to measurable outcomes and what that means in terms of, end of year outcomes. And I assume it's a similar, answer.
Yes, I mean, so generally in the past, and this is the same thing I did with Dr. Gosselin when he was here with my 100-day plan, is as we complete these action steps, I will link the data and the information directly to the plan. I believe I shared with you the Google Doc. At any time throughout the year, you should be able to go to it. And when we have completed something, you will see the information pertaining to that goal in that document.
Great, thank you. So you just have like a link or something?
Yeah, it's a running document. So at the end of the year,
Thank you.
when Dr. Everwine does my evaluation, I can say, here you go, and it's all done and completed. Hopefully, that's a perfect world.
okay, a motion to accept the Morris School improvement plan?
Sorry, Bob, I had one more question.
Well, that's okay.
In the LMHS goals, there were some concerns about staffing and getting the trains through on time. Do you have any concerns about staffing at the elementary school?
Well, thankfully, I'm fully staffed, but recently I needed a paraprofessional, and it took, I think, 3 times to post the position. So we're just not getting,
So
the same situation, right? So if I
would.
were to have a teacher leave, I'm not sure, how many people would apply. For a van driver
I was gonna say that.
or van driver.
Please, I'm starting to feel good.
It's like really in the
We're working on it. We have 2 candidates.
Okay, a motion for the Morris School improvement plan.
I'll make a motion, we approve the school improvement plan for Morris.
I will second.
Any further discussion or question?
Yeah.
Hearing none, all in favor? And note that Megan was not here for that vote.
We are moving on to.
Thank you.
Yeah, the budget update, as I think it would be better if you sit here so that you can.
Okay,
You sure?
Yeah, I have this. I'm good.
Okay, you're kind of working up the chair there. but-
Yes, I know. I do.
Yeah, but, so we're gonna transition Melissa, but I do want to thank again Brenda and Tim. I've had the opportunity to work with Brenda and Tim in former role. And they're both exceptional and they're both strategic. And actually, Ronnie, I think Greg, I don't, is that what you thought?
It depends on how you know me. I guess it's Veronica or Ronnie is either. I think in the community of Lenox, most people know me as Ronnie, but I put Veronica on important things.
So Veronica's,
So either is fine.
she said earlier that I did a little cheerleading early in my open comments. And it is important also to be very, straightforward about and honest about your gaps and your challenges. And it was really great to hear from both of you verbally. I think the ideas and the concepts jumped off the page to me. in what you said today. And also, we're very reflective of the gaps and the needs you're seeing both in your student body and your school. So I appreciate that, and work hard to help you out. Make all that happen. Thank you. With that said, let's shift over to Melissa and jump into FY23 recap and then FY24.
Well, this is the exciting stuff. I'm going to share my screen because I shared with you the spreadsheet that is a monstrosity over the weekend that labels every account and where we put funding. And I put some notes on what might be of concern to me or you, so that you would realize that things are either good or we need to move money in, or we're looking at this account, we anticipate having to move shuffle things around. So aside from that, I have the summary pages, and I'm looking for them now. I'm trying to share.
How did you share that this weekend, Melissa?
What?
Did you send an email on that?
Yes.
Probably me.
It was Friday, I think, maybe.
No, I think it's Sunday.
Oh, Sunday?
Yeah, it was Sunday.
Sunday.
Um,
I didn't see the notes, so how do you?
over to the
I'm
right,
challenged.
the last column over to the right, there is,
Sunday, 2/11.
You just have to slide it over, right?
yeah, it's column P. And so if there's a check mark in that column, I'm gonna try to share this, and I'm not seeing it. Not sure. So if I go here, right? Sharing. You're not seeing it. I don't need to move this because it's on. Okay, so if you look at, this is the spreadsheet that is the budget in its entirety. It starts with Morris, similar to the way that we do the budget booklet, Morris and LMNHS and student services, technology, and administration, both school committee and central admin, as well as custodial. So each of these lines are broken out by operating money. We may have had to transfer funding in because there's contractual obligations, and when we close the budget out or approve the budget, we don't really move those around until after we get to the start of the year, or contracts are negotiated and approved, and individual contracts are negotiated. So that's where you see, the operating funding, the transfer in, the transfer out, encumbrances and expenditures, and then the balance and a percentage. So the way that I look at the biggest part of this budget is salaries. So the way that I look at those is to look at, because timing for every type of employee is different. A full year staff starts July 1. And this year could either receive 26 paychecks or 27, whatever they opted for, because there is an extra paycheck. School year staff start in September, and the teaching unit is 26 weeks, and the school year paraprofessional unit C is 21 weeks. So we have all different percentages for types of employee. And the way to quickly see whether something's awry or askew is to look at the percentages. And that's why I do that, because it's easy for me to say, oh, what's going on here? Go into the historical information and figure out if there was a column movement that wasn't anticipated, something of that nature. And I typically move from reserve for salaries into the operating line to get it to the right percentage. So we're not scrambling at the beginning of the year.
But that gives me a very good snapshot as to how this budget is maneuvering through the year, whether we're short or there's too much in an account and so on. And as I said, salaries are about 75% of the budget. So that's where I start first, and that's what I look at, and that's what I make sure is going properly and funding is put in. After that, I look at the contracted services, the supplies, and other expenses for each of our program areas. But if you look at this budget that's up there now, you can see over to the right, the notes. So anything that might be of question or that I need to do something later on is written there. So if you look at like line 30 for Morris, we're almost depleted with the operating funding, but then it's going to move over to school choice because we budgeted X amount of dollars of school choice, and that's the line that I put that in. So that's the spreadsheet, that's the nuts and bolts. And then I have an overview of this budget so that you can see what that looks like. Here, I think. Sorry, bear with me a moment. I only have two open. Yeah, that's the one I wanted. I'm going to do here, I see. You haven't pulled it down. There you go. I'm sorry about this. Hold on just a minute. No. Sorry about that. So these are just a few slides to give you an idea of. All right. So. Thank you for your patience. This is the 23 financial update summary pages. And this is taken from the spreadsheet that we just went through. So to look at the overall budget, our operating budget, for this fiscal year, which includes special revenues like school choice and circuit breaker and athletics revenue, tuition revenue, things of that nature, equals 13,418,843. We have encumbrances, which is encumbrances occur when purchase order is put through to hold the funding so that it's not spent elsewhere. So when we start the new year, we will put in annual purchase orders for utilities, transportation, big ticket items, to take that money so that you don't get to this point and say, oh, we're rich, we have all this money here. And we need to make sure that we encumber it, which is to secure it so that it's not spent elsewhere. So we have encumbrances of 677 and year-to-date actual expenditures, bills paid of 3.980, which leaves 8,760,000. So what we've expended or encumbered total is 34.13%. That seems low, I'm sure, because it is December. But the bulk of our business, our education starts in September, so it's only 3 months in. So it's really not low, and it's the combination of school starting in September, the bulk of our salaries beginning in September and only being at the 7th paycheck of the year. So that's part of the reason why you see a lower percentage, even though you think we're halfway through the year, which we are, but you know, our school year goes from September to June. So salaries is a big category, and these are the percentages or 9 payrolls through the year. These are the percentages I was mentioning earlier, and this is how we get there. Instructional school year unit A have 9 payrolls to date so far. So we should be at those percentages as expended amounts. And that's sort of like the key to whether or not we're over or under, as I said earlier. Our other areas are contracted services, supplies, and other expenses. And you can see under contracted services, we're 75% expended. But contracted services are just what I spoke about: utilities, transportation, things that are that happen all through the year to keep our buildings operating and to keep our kids getting to school, things of that nature. It's pretty cut and dry. We anticipate the total, encumber it, and see where we are and adjust as the year goes on. If it's higher, too low as an encumbrance. Supplies were at almost 60% expended or encumbered. And that's really, there's supplies that are ordered, educational supplies that are ordered either over the summer or right at the beginning of the school year. And then there are other supplies that are periodic. So toner, pens, paper, things of that nature are periodic as needed. The others are we needed to start the school year. So typically you need the supply item being a high percentage at this point. In fact, I think that's sort of that's a low one right now, because we should be buying things right at the beginning of the year and buying what we need to keep us through the year for instructional supplies. And other expenses such as out of district tuition, printing costs, conference and travel, we're at 42%, which is, it's fine. This budget is in good shape. We have enough in reserve to settle, to be able to pay out the negotiated contracts and added special ed expenses that we've actually had this year that we had sort of anticipated, so sock some money away in the reserve as well. And that does help, you know, so that you're not panicking when those occur. Mm-hmm. This last slide shows the site and the percentage total expended for that building area. So Morris total, including salaries, everything for that building, 28.37. And so you can read going down, and as you can see, as we get lower, technology is a 12-month program, operations and maintenance. The reserve is what was used for the salary increase offset. So that's a high percentage expended already. We do have about 150,000 left in that reserve. And administration is at 62%. We've had some, you know, we've had some changeover and some added expenses added in there. So, but that's normal. We'll be fine. We'll be a little bit over in the superintendent's line, but not horrendous. So it's doable. But that's where we sit right now for the 23 budget.
Okay.
Now I'm going to try to share again.
So it has a slide program.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. Third time's a charm. Okay. So I followed the same format as the first budget process update that we delivered about a month ago. And this one is about, kind of goes into detail with where we are right now. So where are we right now? We've met with principals and directors. I can't.
Just go to the little box.
Can you click over the bar in the top left corner?
No, she doesn't see that screen.
Yeah, I can. Oh, I see. That's not.
Because it's up app.
Okay,
You've got the mouse, that's you.
Oh, yeah, you
There
can.
we go.
thank you. Look at you.
Success.
So, Dr. Goslin, Dr. Eberlein, Jake, Mark, and I all met with, building principals and, directors, special ed director, student services, to discuss where they were at with their needs and their budgets. And, those occurred last week. So we do have all of the departmental budgets begun with numbers in there, and we're going to see, there are some asks, as you've heard here in this meeting. At every site, there has been a personnel request. So you'll see that in the initial budget presentation, January 9th. It ranges from paras to interventionists and things of that nature that have been identified as needs. So we've met with the principals, we're putting it all together. We have sent the column movement and retirement survey out to all staff, and this helps us budget with, column changes and retirement payouts that we may need to do. Some people retire mid-year. So that helps there. And we're getting those responses, no retirements yet at this moment, but a few column movements, so that does help us. Final budgets, any changes that were discussed during the meetings or questions, numbers that still need to be put in have to be done by December 14th, 2 days from now. That's for this group here. And then we're going to review, analyze, and finalize the budget. The target date for that is December 22nd, so that we can put it together and present it to you guys on January 9th. And this is a slide from the first presentation, but it's from January 9th, from today to the end of the process, and talks about the key dates and school committee approval, and we'll be ready to go for that first presentation, January 9th, and then the individual schools and programs will come up and give their presentations after that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Melissa?
Any scary updates since last time that we should be bracing ourselves for?
Sounds like it.
No, actually, with some of the increases, there's been some decreases. There's and renewed interest in field trips and higher numbers there. And I think that's a decision the committee will have to decide whether or not they want to, have that amount in there. I think they're using it for the field trips as curriculum, which is the best way, I think. It might be something that we do want to do. It's back to the levels pre-pandemic. And then some personnel asks, I think special ed, we have one additional tuition placement that occurred this year that will continue through next year. But that's really about it. Inflation figures are more manageable, I think. I have a better feel for it. I've plugged in initially 5% for some services. And for the revenue side, there is a bit more in some of the accounts. We don't see the change in school choice. Remember, I said that I want to wait till December. We don't see that. We don't get our payment until the end of the month. So I'll be more comfortable with the number that I have then if it does increase. But that's really it. And we're not talking about benefits, so we won't know about that until the end of January. An increase there. But right now, we're still hovering around that 6% that we talked about earlier in the year. It's just shy of that, but we're still playing with numbers, so it could change.
Well, listen, can you tell me a little bit about the process you go through with the middle school, the elementary school and LMHS in terms of getting their budget numbers? Do you like ask them to submit a survey sheet, their needs, or how's that conversation shake out?
So I work, the superintendent with the principals. The principals work with their staff to develop their, and you guys could probably talk about that, but the way that it works with me is the principals and directors will receive historical information, a budget, Google Docs that with, a 24 request right now that they plug that in, and a column where they can explain and rationalize and give me a narrative about why it is that they're needing this extra or reducing this. So
you're starting with a template filled out for them? Is that what I'm hearing?
Historical information is filled out, but that's it.
Okay.
They complete the staffing, they complete the new numbers and the request. And a lot of it is based upon, sometimes the enrollment figures, as Brenda said, go up. There's more need. So a lot of it's based on that, but they're plugging in all of that information. What my office provides is the historical information. What this budget was and what was expended, what the next budget was, what a few years of history, a 5-year average, the FTEs for this current year, not next year. And then they put in the rest.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, the only thing I would add is that the conversation that we have when we're in the room together is also part of that tug and pull around what do you need, how to link back into your priorities, your goals, where you're seeing gaps. And so I do think that that's a fairly important part of the process, because there is a level of justification that I think the superintendent is demanding or requesting of the principal to explain. The other thing I think that Melissa does, which is great, it's certainly not a zero-based budget because you're struggling with the template and put a building forward in there. But is that she does look at and they get data on where they didn't spend money or haven't spent money. And so the question is, okay, is that something that's needed? And so there is a tug and pull around, not only, it's not just about ads, it's also about allocation of resources that you have currently.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're getting the conversations in that whatever they feel like they need, we're hearing about.
Sure.
And we're not, sometimes the town does it to us, right? They say, hey, you need to be 3%.
Right.
And then people try to fit into that footprint. And I want to make sure we have conversations to make sure that there's justification for why or why not to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the goal in the 9th, and I have a lot of sprinting to do between now and the 9th, you get caught up and fully understand the budget, and then hopefully pitch it in a compelling way. Is to make that value proposition. If we have asked, what's the value that this brings to the district in terms of potentially investing additional funds.
I love what you put together, and this is terrific. Really great level of detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. So now we're at the principal and superintendent search updates. The interim principal search, we've narrowed it to 3 candidates that are going to be interviewed this week, 2 tomorrow night and 1 on Thursday. Dr. Everyone will be available for some of those interviews, and then ultimately, we will put the decision. It is his decision to hire principals, but we're going to go through. We have a team, 10 or 11 of us will be doing the interviewing tomorrow night. They're not public interviews because in some cases these people have not notified their district that they're candidates. So these are not public interviews at this point. Obviously, it becomes public when Dr. Everyone select the candidate, we need to follow up with the school about that.
Did we settle some of the questions around the interim position, whether they would be eligible to be permanent? Expectations of the role, that sort of thing?
We're telling people that they're eligible to apply for the permanent, but we're letting people know that being selected as the interim is all
No
we're,
advantage, no
that's
advantage.
all we're doing right now, currently.
And then I will just add that we also want to be sure that the candidates, and I believe that they have been and are notified of that, so that they can really come into it with eyes wide open, that the opportunity to be an interim does not guarantee a long term, because we do believe that potentially we could have the person hired having the best job interview they've ever had and being able to actually do the work. And we don't want to propose upon that, but we also know there are great candidates that might choose not to apply for an intern because they're in a different job and they don't feel they can move at this time. So we don't want to foreclose any opportunities for candidates for that process, which my name, Mr. Chairman, I believe that will be directed by Dr. Eberwein and team in whatever way is appropriate.
Yeah,
We have it, other than getting the posting out there, which is out there and active and open, we're not participating, we're not involved in that yet, sorry.
So just I can give you a quick update on what I know on that at this point, which is that posting is out, we have applications coming in, and I believe it closes at the end of this calendar year. We've got another 10 days, longer than that, I guess. Addition to that, Dr. Goslin had put out a request for interest in serving on the committee. And then I believe had a lottery in which he selected the committee. So the committee is actually in place. They haven't been notified yet. And I was just talking to Amy about this today in terms of notification. And so I think we do want to send something out next week, but I thought it'd be smart for me to travel through this interim set of interviews with you all first. Because we kind of need to see how that sort of plays out. It certainly could be a possibility that none of the candidates are deemed acceptable, and then I think we would be maybe looking at a different process. So I want this week to sort of play out, and then I think we'll see how quickly we're going to launch. I mean, there's also a little bit of concern around, interview committee fatigue, and so what we can do. You're in the middle of a superintendent search too. So we'll watch the timing carefully, and we'll have an update for you, as will Veronica and Bob at the next meeting. Thanks.
Superintendent, we got an interim superintendent.
Yeah.
Check. Full-time superintendent, search process is going along. We kicked off the search committee, which is a team of 10, and met November 28th. So I guess it was a week or two ago. Sort of introduce everybody, orient them. Liz LaFond went through all the various legal requirements, and lay out what the process will be, which is, first of all, held community forums last week, and also had the community survey out last week, and we'll come back to that in a minute. The application is open through Wednesday. The first couple of applications had started coming last week, so we know it was working properly, but Liz assures me that everything comes in at the very end, and we will see over the next couple of days.
Did you say Wednesday?
Sorry?
It's Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah. So we expect to have a good crop of applicants in by Wednesday. MASC will perform an initial screen of just anyone for any reasons they don't feel would be an appropriate candidate for us. And then Liz will also attempt to speak with folks who are coming from out of the area to confirm up front that they're very clear on the expectations about coming to the area. She will then hand off the full packet of all applications to the full committee probably on Friday. And they will have over the weekend and the start of next week to review. And then we will all meet next Wednesday evening to agree on who we want to extend interview offers to. And so those will go out just before we all shut down for the holidays and aim to schedule the end of the first week after the holidays. So that's sort of the foreseeable process. Seems to be moving along. But then I think for discussion right now, we both wanted to share with this committee what we've learned both from forums and the survey, and then also get your input on it. Well, ultimately, this is the group whose thoughts on what we need to be looking for and prioritizing need to be top of mind for ourselves, and then we'll bring that back to the search committee. I guess maybe I'll just do survey first because there are a couple of things.
How was the participation in the forum?
Well, so Ronnie and Megan will talk about that. There was a very large student participation and then good set of parents and teachers as well. But let me show quickly the survey data, and then Megan and Ronnie led the forum so they can run through that. You need to actually, can someone promote me to member?
Well, I can.
Try.
We were having, that was one of the technical difficulties we were having. I just say we as if I have anything to do with it. A very royal we.
Or to either.
So I'm allowing you to talk.
Oh, I was only to show.
You want to show the slide?
Oh.
He's already done. There's only going to be, I'm going to give you a quick solution.
Whether or not anyone will.
The only solution, based on what we know about the tech at this moment in time, is that you have to email it to Melissa.
Oh, right. All right. The slides aren't that great. I'm just going to tell you what they say.
I have an email to it if you want it.
Really, I was ashamed by the quality of the slides to begin with, and now it's made about.
They'll leave your dignity
So the two key things to talk about are, one, we presented, and there were about 75 respondents, largest group being parents, but also some students, good group of faculty and a few support staff as well. And they were first given a set of 11 characteristics or strengths that they might care about in a superintendent and asked to check off as many as they saw as being important. And it interestingly sort of split into a few that almost everybody checked off, and then a few that some not nearly as many people. So the 4 top ones that were all selected by 60 to 80% of respondents. Number 1 top item was a champion for education in the community, leading a collaborative spirit amongst teachers, administrators, parents, and community stakeholders. Number 2, an engaged and inspirational leader with a vision for growth, as well as excellence and a commitment to educating the whole child. Number 3, an experienced professional with outstanding communication, interpersonal and management skills, able to navigate complexity of organizations, finances, and budgets, including building relationships with municipal government leaders and employee unions. And number 4, previous experience as a public school educator. So those were the 4 checked off by large majority. A couple that were chosen by 40 to 60% of respondents. One was passionate about lifelong learning or teaching experience and possessing knowledge and experience about special education law and best practices, working with diverse student populations and career technical education. And then the other was a leader with a focus on student achievement, a history of community and parent collaboration, and an ability to motivate others. And then the last chunk that were chosen by 20 to 40%, one was commitment to recruiting, developing, and sustaining a culture of collaboration across the district and its programs. Next was commitment to leadership in improving educational opportunity and commitment to educational equity for marginalized and underserved students. Experience engaging with policymakers, advocating for resources, legislation, and community engagement on behalf of the school district. And then the lowest 2 were previous experience as a superintendent and a skilled negotiator able to work with municipal officials and offices, especially relating to budgeting. So that's a long string of buzzwords in various combinations. If I were to synthesize it, And I think this came through both in the free response, and then Ronnie and Megan will speak to it. Very high priority on sort of visible leader in the community, for education, collaboration, engaged, spirit of inspirational leadership, et cetera, et cetera. Relatively less focus on the sort of technical aspects of the role. And I think particularly interesting, previous experience as a public school educator, very high, previous experience as a superintendent, actually almost the lowest. So that was kind of the multiple choice option. And then there was also a free response. What do you see as main strengths and what do you believe are main challenges? And there were tons of responses, and we can certainly share the whole set, but to summarize kind of what was mentioned most often, in terms of main strengths, I'd say number one by far was experience with talented, committed teachers and staff. Second, pretty close runner-up, probably broad and rigorous curriculum with high standards. Then also a lot of mentions of small class size, high level of community and family engagement, and a worth mentioning set of mentions of strong reputation and ranking, and strong and talented student body achievement across athletics and the arts. And so those were kind of key themes that emerged on the strength side. And then in terms of main challenges, unsurprisingly, far and away, the biggest one was consistency and continuity in leadership. I think what was probably useful about it was like the why does that matter? I mean, you could imagine a hypothetical world in which superintendent and principal are gig economy jobs and you pick a new one every day. And we know intuitively that that would be a terrible way to run a district, but it's important, I think, to actually sort of specify what have the costs been, what do people feel is missing. And the two that came up repeatedly, one was a real emphasis on trust, and a feeling of loss of trust, both by faculty and staff and students, and the effect that has had on morale. And then the second one was a feeling of a lack of accountability, that when you keep cycling through the people at the top, there's a feeling that within the staff and then within the students, there's just not the sort of enforcement of rules and expectations, consequences, and so forth. I think that came through somewhat in the school improvement as well. But those things, trust and accountability, were by far the two main areas of focus. And then the other ones that got significant mention, one was a problem of inadequate communication, partly a need for just more, but I think everybody always says we want more communication. There was a real focus here related to the trust point on wanting more transparency and a sense of kind of honest communication. A lot of mention of concerns about bullying and specifically highlighting not just sort of generic bullying, but including overtones of racism and homophobia as significant problems. And then a lot of people have taken note of the growth in class size as something that certainly they see as a challenge, and I think for a lot of frustration. So that's the survey data. Happy to say more about it, but kind of is what it is. I think I'll turn over to Megan and Ronnie. I have a lot more color from some really good conversations.
Can I just say one thing about the survey? And one of the things is, and again, I think I don't want to at all call this process rushed, because it was important for us to be within the season of superintendent searches and really not to be losing out on the opportunity of candidates who have taken positions in other districts not being considered for ours. So I'm trying to balance that with getting input, because I think input from all stakeholders is important. What I don't think we did either successfully or at all, I'm not really sure, is get this survey to the broader community. So I would say this is a Lenox survey, Lenox school survey, and not really a town of Lenox survey. And typically we do also try to get input from the larger leadership. And I think there will be in the search process and we're finding an opportunity to get more of that. And I do think that in the last couple of years, we've heard some feedback from various community members saying they want to be more connected to the Lenox public schools. And again, if the survey is telling us that people within the buildings aren't feeling connected because of our leadership changeover, a goal for the new leader would be how are you both connecting with the Lenox Public Schools community and the broader community, because we do have a lot of community support, but you don't want to take advantage of that by not really communicating with the community. So this is a Lenox Public School survey and not a community survey, and I think that's okay. I think we really need this information, but I know I thought or had the thought that it was going out to a broader place, and I loosely surveyed some people who didn't know anything about it, and we were at the town meeting last week. So I think that's okay. I just want to say what it is. And then I don't know. Megan.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about, I mentioned before, the student forum portion of our day. It was really eye-opening. I'm very emotional at times. Again, I just give the biggest kudos to our students who felt comfortable in that environment to kind of speak up about some very difficult topics and some difficult issues that they've experienced. A couple of themes that I kind of personally kept hearing over and over again was the investment in the community, in the school and outside of the school. It was noted, that this person, it'd be great to see them at art events, at sporting events, anything that kind of, goes along the school community. And then getting that collaboration back with the town. So from what I didn't grow up in Lenox, but from what I'm hearing is that there's always been a very, very close relationship between the school district and the townspeople, so to speak. Another point that we heard loud and clear was building an inclusive culture. Unfortunately, we heard many, many stories that were very upsetting, that did not align with Lenox's values. And I think that was probably what I walked away most upset by. But again, the courage to bring these situations to light is pretty incredible. And then something else I found interesting, and this was also heard several times, but what is important to the students is having an individual who is okay, willing, and comfortable to have hard conversations, uncomfortable conversations. A lot of times these will be with parents, who might have a lot of pull in the community or like to kind of push back on administration, and somebody that's not afraid to really stick to what's right and do the right thing, not do the popular thing. I very much agree with that, and I was happy to hear that our students spoke of it as well. Just full disclosure, Ronnie and I did leave for the faculty and staff teachers portion, just because we wanted them to be able to feel like we weren't, creeping around the back of the room and listening, and to be able to speak freely and candidly. And Liz said that did go very well. If you want to add anything?
And I will say with regard to the students, I think that there is a theme that we can certainly talk about going forward, is that there was some direct sentiment of the desire to have sort of a more why I mentioned about healing is the opportunity to ask questions about what happened with the transitions, because they definitely felt like they just didn't know what was going on. And even though we know that there's certain personnel confidentialities, it doesn't mean that we couldn't, in fact, engage in a conversation with the students about why such things happen. And so they can get some sense of connection and not feeling like they're just an extra part of all of this, that actually all of this impacts them every single day. And them really wanting to engage in sort of that type of a conversation where they can ask. We were trying to be really careful to acknowledge their statements, especially of pain and harm and concern, without getting into explanations and things that would take away from the importance of that moment. And it was a forum to hear from them, not necessarily for us to give a lot of explanations, but they directly expressed wishing to have another opportunity. And we recognize as school committee members that typically, and the superintendent search is a big part of what we do, but getting in and kind of meeting with the students can be something we can choose to do as a district. It's something Megan and I both expressed interest in doing, but want to do that within proper respect for the leadership. But we also need to have our student engagement, student advisory committee, which is not formed again because of leadership change, so that students can have a more active, regular participation in the appropriate leadership forums and giving feedback. So that was something that they definitely expressed. So they also expressed that there were students that were there that I think were asked to come there by their administrative teachers rather than purely a sign up and come. I always think that's a little interesting because we ended up with such a large group, which was great, but you have sort of the people that sit at the back And sometimes they're there because they want to be there, or sometimes they're because they don't want to be somewhere else. Just to say that, so that was very notable too, that for some students, they were like, the people that we're struggling with are sitting in the room and not really participating, and that was part of it. So I think we could do a little more work with follow-up. But it was really great and powerful, and really, you know, when we talk about the positives, we do have some pretty wonderful students who also, by the way, talked about the resources that they do have in the building, and our student, our school adjustment counselors and other people that they really felt very strongly that they appreciated that they had resources. So that is important, important to know. And then when it came to the parent forum, we conducted that because Liz had to leave. So Liz LaFond is our consultant. She actually had expressed that she typically does these all just as a consultant, and no school committee members even there. We really wanted to be part of it because we have to help make these decisions. And so she conducted, as we said, the faculty and staff ones. And then we did the parent community. We only had about 7 parents, but we had a high participation of parents, I think, signing up into the survey. So perhaps many of them felt that the need to be present personally was, they were pulling at too many resources. We had a town meeting later that night. So, but the parents, I think, would similarly talked about community, communication, transparency, return to the excellent reputation of Lenox, wanting leaders that will commit to our community. So I think that what we have in the survey reflects very much what they told us personally. So understanding the length of our meeting tonight, I won't belabor it too much unless you have questions, but I think their comments of the small pool in person reflected a lot of what showed up in the survey of the larger percentage of parents that answered it. So.
Okay.
Well, I should just mention briefly, just because I think it's important that the faculty and staff's views are reflected also. So Liz had provided notes to us on that. And so just to sort of briefly share some of those, I think the, you know, again, the theme of sort of consistency and steady leadership was obviously a very important one. Emphasized wanting someone visible in the schools who wants to know the staff, from the teachers to the custodians. Teachers really want to see someone focused on the idea of distributed and collaborative leadership, and who has kind of a track record of that model, both on leadership in terms of communication. Someone who's passionate, and this connects to the student point about having opportunities for students to be involved in decision making as well, and more directly engaged in how the school is run. And then just emphasize that in terms of the interview process, they really want to see a focus on how the candidate has sort of grown in their current position and what they've made of the place that they've been, and what they therefore want to make of the next opportunity, and that this is not just the stepping stone from point A to point C. So those were some of those points. So that's sort of, that's what we have floating in the ether as we think about evaluating candidates. But I think if, you know, to the extent that you guys have other points that you see as particularly important, particularly if they differ from this set, could be important.
I think that's a pretty good set. I did wonder if anybody had a chance yet to revisit some of the contractual things we talked about. As Dr. Dawson.
Talk a little bit about
Yeah, we'll go into executive session right at the end and talk about.
Okay.
I guess the one thing I was specifically asked for input on is just the question of superintendent experience, because I think that's something that by default everyone says, like, of course it'd be great if they had superintendent experience. You know, I think the reality for a small district is that if you look at who a small district typically hires, it's not somebody who is coming from a place where they were already the superintendent. And so we probably will have some candidates who are superintendents, but a lot will not. And I was just looking at sort of districts of our size or small districts that have made hires over the last few years, and they are not existing superintendents. They tend to either be an internal principal candidate or someone who is an assistant principal or assistant superintendent or comparable position in another district. And we saw both from the survey people seem pretty comfortable with that, and also had a good conversation with parents about it. But didn't know if folks here had a particular point of view.
Relative to whether they should have previous experience.
Yeah, just how highly that needs to weigh.
Yeah, if you go back in Lennox history, most of the people that we've had from 1973 on have been a principal, not necessarily, or maybe a central office person, but not necessarily a previous superintendent, with the exception of the interim head recently. So I think you're right that that's kind of the nature of the beast. Is in a small district you don't always have a lot of acting sitting superintendents who are applying.
Yeah, I'd be okay with somebody who just has strong administrative potential.
I mean, it may reduce the learning curve, but it comes down to the person.
That's what we're up to.
All right. So
Before we go to subcommittee, can I just quickly, it falls under budget actually, but not, it's a scheduling issue. So I wanted to float out whether or not we can, or we would agree to move our meeting on March 13th to March 20th. First of all, I'm gonna be out of town, but I also know that's our budget hearing. I feel like we have it front-ended enough that we have a significant amount of time from each of the hearings and negotiation and ever to work out the details of our budget before we have to get the warrant and get it to town meeting the first week of May. So if people were inclined to be willing to entertain a motion to move it from March 13th to March 20th, I would make such a motion. Should I just take it? You guys can.
I think that we've had this as late as early April in the past. I think that I don't have a problem. I don't see a problem necessarily moving to the 20th. I don't know what other committee members.
Melissa, do you?
No, I'm just checking my schedule. I don't think it's a problem for the town. That would be my only concern. But they have the meeting early June, so that's still plenty of time.
Well, the
Early
meeting,
May,
the town
early
meeting,
May.
the town
Oh,
meeting
it's
is,
May.
Early May,
yeah.
it's the first Thursday of May.
And they need to have at least 3 weeks or something to get the warrant out. But March 20th, March 13th, either one of those is way ahead of that time frame.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just have to put together the numbers, but I can do that ahead of time in anticipation that it was.
I was looking at that time to maybe get some Caribbean island. My wife, never goes along.
Well, that's why I was also checking, because other people might have done a better job of making their plans to not conflict with the school committee meeting than I did. Because I looked and I said, I thought that was when I got back, and it's.
Do we want to?
Do we need a motion, or do we want to just?
I don't know that you know, are people good with having the 20th rather than the 13th?
No, I have no.
Melissa, do you mind changing that on the overall budget schedule? Thank you all. I do appreciate it.
Okay, subcommittees, we largely haven't had, the governance and leadership got canceled.
Yeah, I have a request out to try to reschedule.
Finance, we have one coming up with the town, frankly, we had intended to have one of our own prior to that, which didn't happen because of my being sick and I might come back in Minneapolis. And there's not time in the schedule to do it prior to Monday. Human resources been meeting all the time. Teaching, learning.
Our minutes file is very.
I just give a very quick, which is that we did have a meeting. We recognized that one of the major goals that we wanted to work on was addressing the culture and the bullying issues, but also felt that there was a lot happening in our leadership changes that it made more sense to do that after the new year. So we're actually postponing the December meeting until January because of so many meetings around HR and feeling. We discussed what Mr. Lee referred to of the workings on tightening up the accountability on athletics and tying that to behavior. And do an athletic honor code that we discussed, and then we was one other thing. I think it was just more about where we are, a lot of the culture issues, and that, you know, having another task force when we're bringing together all these hiring committees just kind of didn't make a lot of sense. And then when Dr. Everyone is with us, we can in January have a conversation about what role the school committee can play to support some of the on school culture that is clearly in the plan. So our next meeting will be in January.
And school building, Dr. Gosselin was informed by the Mass School Building Authority that they're not putting our project forward this year, which means that when the window opens again, we'll do a lot of cutting and pasting, and if there's new stuff to add, we'll add new stuff. But generally speaking, it's cut and paste and to resubmit at the end of the date. So again, that window usually opens to the change. So just keep open.
So that would be for 23?
It'll be for
next
it'll be a SOI for 23, 24, I guess, yeah.
Okay.
So I did get notice, I'm sorry, I've been a little flooded with emails, but I believe the window is gonna open on January 18th. So, but I'll get you that.
Yeah.
Specifically, so you know, yeah, and I think as you pointed out, it can just be sort of refiled.
We got our excited when they met with us in September, but that was premature excitement. Okay, so I need,
Bob, before you start going to executive session, I did have a question. I think Dr. Galson, want to make sure the transition from Dr. Galson was, we've got everything we needed, like with the transition plan, do we have our items that we know of that need to be worked on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. There was a transition sheet that he put together. We reviewed it. Actually, he did a lot of work to close out a lot of the open items. We're in good shape. I mean, it doesn't mean that some of those things won't reemerge. It's just the way.
Now, I know one of the items that was still out there was around faculty bullying on MHS, that he had pledged to finish that investigation before yet.
And that happened.
Okay, that's great. All right, very good. Thank you.
yeah, no, I was kind of following the document and the transition things that's listed.
Yeah.
Okay, a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we move to executive session for the purpose of Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel without the intent to return to public meeting.
I'll second that.
This calls for a roll call vote.
Veronica Penton, aye.
Bob Vaughn, aye.
Megan Kirby, I.
Christine Mara, aye.
Bob, aye.
Or Cass, aye.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
Good night.